everyone, and welcome back to the network, where previously we took a look at all these Metroid amiibos sort of in my collection and talked a little bit about their functionality and whatnot. So today we're going to be taking a look at my Metroid collection and kind of just talking about the different games and stuff sort of leading up to Metroid Prime 4 Beyond releasing again, hopefully sometime this year, because otherwise that'll just be sad because we have some big plans for it. We're kind of around when that game is about to release. But without any further introduction, let's take a look at my Metroid games. So to kick things off, we'll start with the original NES Metroid. Now this is the first edition of the game. There is one that's like a later rendition that comes with alternate cover art where the whole thing is yellow and then I think Samus is just sitting on the front of it. But this is one of the original releases of Metroid that came out back in 1986. And I would have to say that this one is probably the worst to go back to in the series. I mean, sure, it's the beginning. This is where Metroid sort of began, and to an extent the Metroidvania genre kind of came from this, but this game, going back to it today, is kind of just like an absolute pain in the butt because there is no map and pretty much most of the game looks about the same. So you're navigating corridors essentially blind, which in turn can make things a little difficult in terms of, you know, backtracking to go and get different equipment. And there's a lot of cryptic things in this game because the world looks the same regardless of where you go. Like, sure, there's certain color palettes for different areas, but for the most part, every room looks about the same, so that doesn't help with your navigation. But also, like, invisible blocks and hidden blocks also look like they belong there, so you kind of have to go around bombing everything until you can find out where to go. Definitely a game that needs Nintendo power to help guide you through, or, you know, if you got a pen and paper, you can do a map. But yeah, NES Metroid, it's a fun game if you have like a map or some sort of guide with you, but trying to play this thing blind can be a big pain in the butt. Next, we have a copy of Metroid 2, The Return of Samus for the Nintendo Game Boy. Now, this pretty much is just a vast improvement from the NES game. First, you have save points, which is really nice. Then you have refill stations, so you don't have to farm for things. It's just great. The only thing that this is lacking still is a map. So it's kind of hard to navigate once again, but there were some really good guides in Nintendo Power that I actually used to, you know, play through this game on our video that we did a little while back. I think it was like 2022 or something like that. I'll go ahead and link to a playlist of all the Metroid games we've done down in the description. So if you want to watch, you know, extensive gameplay for any of these, you can go ahead and check that out. But yeah, this was actually a pretty good find. I think I got it for $12 at a pawn shop. I was just flicking through, and at that point I wasn't super hardcore into Metroid. I just started retro collecting, and then I see this and I'm like, oh shoot, there's a Metroid 2. That's a random game to find in the wild. Let me pick that up. And naturally the battery was dead, so I did have to do a repair. I believe this is the first Game Boy cartridge that I did like a battery replacement on, so that's, you know, just a lot of history with Metroid 2, I gotta say. And then we have the cult classic Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo. Now this game was actually kind of fun to get. This was not my first Metroid game by any means, but it was definitely like the third or fourth one that I was super hardcore looking for. Like, as soon as I got into the Super Nintendo in terms of retro collecting, everyone said Super Metroid is like the best one in the series, so I was trying to hunt for a copy of this locally, because at the time when, you know, you could pick this thing up online, it was going for like 60, 70 bucks. It was pretty expensive, and I ended up going to this small like mom and pop game shop that was way out of the way. It was like an hour and a half drive, and I just asked, hey, do you guys have a copy of Super Metroid in stock? And they're like, yeah, we do. And I'm like, all right, well, how much is it? They're like, it's 50 bucks. I'm like, okay, can I see the cartridge? And when they pulled this thing out, I am not joking, it looked like this was unearthed yesterday. It was so gross. Like, there was literally dirt and stuff all caked into the cartridge slot, so that was disgusting. This front panel was super dirty along with the back, but I did a very extensive cleaning and got it pretty much to this state, which is really nice. If I can find a picture of it, I think I have a picture of when it was dirty. This was like 2019 or something like that, so I'll go through and I'll see if I can find a picture after I pick this up shortly, but I doubt I have one. But yeah, yeah, this was probably the first Metroid game that I actually played through to completion on a CRT on my Super Nintendo. It was great. This one I really do like. I've gone back to beat it another 3 times since picking this thing up originally on this cartridge. And yeah, Super Metroid, if you have not played it, I definitely recommend it. You should really give it a try. It is a great game. All right, next up we have Metroid Zero Mission. Now this is actually the first Metroid game that I ever owned. And what's so great about this is I didn't even really know what this was. I was like, oh, it's some sort of space game. I played it on my blue Game Boy Advance SP. I remember playing this game like waiting to get my hair cut. Like, that is how much I remember this. And surprisingly enough, this was probably not my favorite game for the Game Boy Advance. I played this and I had like 007 Nightfire. So that was like the 2 games I had for my SP, and I played it a lot. I mean, Nightfire was kind of hard on the GBA, not gonna lie, but Zero Mission was definitely really good. We used to live in an apartment with like this other family that like just moved in, and they had GameCube and a lot of Game Boys and a DS and stuff, and so they kind of opened me up to a lot of what those other consoles had. So I kind of was like, I don't really want to play my GBA anymore, and I was more interested in the GameCube at the time. But yeah, Zero Mission, I've since gone back to complete it on this cartridge at least a couple of times. So if you try to play like NES Metroid, this game is pretty much a remake of it from the ground up. It's a lot better. It has a map. It's pretty much the same story, and then they kind of tack on a little bit of extra juice at the end, which I won't go into. Now, another fun story that I have for Metroid Zero Mission is one of my buddies in like middle school was talking to me about Metroid, and this was probably like 5 or 6 years after I kind of put this sort of stuff away and hadn't really thought about it. And I'm like, Metroid. I'm like, I think I have a Metroid game. And so I pull this thing out and I show him, and he's like, oh, this is not Metroid, because he grew up playing the Metroid Prime games. So he was like, yeah, what the hell is this? Then next up we have Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance. This is Metroid 4, and when it comes to like the main series, so you know, you have the NES game, Metroid 1, Metroid 2, obviously. Super Metroid is Metroid 3, and this one is Metroid 4. Now, pretty much the plot of this thing is Samus gets infected with the parasite. She ends up being saved with some Metroid DNA, and then she becomes part Metroid, and you kind of go through this biogenetic station that's up in space that the Galactic Federation has, and yada yada yada. So it's pretty good. I mean, it's difficult. It's a lot harder than the previous Metroid games. So if you like a more difficult Metroidvania experience, this one, by their base offering, is pretty difficult. But then, you know, as you play through, you can unlock a hard mode and all that sort of stuff. And this was one that I picked up online. It was pretty cheap. This was before, you know, the pandemic, so the games were cheaper then. I got this for $24. Now it's going for like upwards of $50, which is too much. Yeah, Metroid Fusion, played through it once, was like, oh, that's pretty good. Don't really care to play through it again. This thing actually also has a mode for the GameCube, because I believe Metroid Fusion came out with Metroid Prime. So if you had a link cable and a copy of this, if you beat this game and then linked it to Metroid Prime, I believe you got like a art gallery or something in here, and if you beat Metroid Prime and then linked Fusion to it, you would unlock the suit from this game to use in the original Metroid Prime, which is pretty neat. So yeah, Metroid Fusion, definitely a neat game. If you like more difficult Metroid games, this is definitely one that you should probably look into. Alright, and then while we were talking about Prime, we have Metroid Prime. Now, this one was the first Metroid game to release since Super Metroid, so it was kind of a big deal back in the GameCube era. I mean, I didn't really play this around that time, and even that buddy that I had in the apartment did not have a copy of Metroid Prime. He primarily played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, because I remember the Chow Garden, and Resident Evil 4. So my sort of nostalgia for those games was watching him play it when we were hanging out in the apartment. But yeah, Metroid Prime, the first jump from Metroid going from a 2D game to a 3D first-person shooter, really exploration shooter, I guess is the way that you could call it. This one was definitely a game changer for the GameCube, quite literally. And again, it had that sort of link cable functionality. that you would get, which is listed right here on the back of the book. You can link it to Metroid Fusion to get your bonuses and whatnot. But yeah, definitely a good game in the series. It is a departure from the 2D games, but still, it's a pretty fun one. Definitely the controls can be a little weird though, seeing as this is like a 2001 release and it was a GameCube controller, so they didn't have like, you know, dual analog stick aiming. So that's a little bit to get used to if you're not familiar with that type of gaming. But yeah, it's a pretty good game nonetheless. And actually, the fun thing about Metroid Prime is that it got a remaster on the Nintendo Switch. So if you don't really own a GameCube or feel like fuddling around with the early 2000s controls, you can get the Metroid Prime Remaster. Now, I actually have mine inverted, as this is the original cover art that you had with it, but it came with reversible cover art that kind of mimics like Metroid Prime 2 Echoes a little bit. I don't know what this sort of design looks like. It reminds me of a different Metroid game, I just can't really place it. But yeah, this is pretty much an HD remaster of the GameCube game, and then it has alternate control schemes, which is pretty nice. We did cover this game extensively, or at least the different ports of it, on the channel already. But yeah, this is definitely a good game. I would highly recommend picking this up. The only thing that sucks with this release is that sort of Metroid Fusion tie-in where you could get the fusion suit simply does not exist in this remaster, because obviously you can't link your Game Boy Advance to the Switch. So, well, actually, technically you could via the GameCube adapter, but this game doesn't have the functionality for that built in. So yeah, that's pretty much just missing content at this point, which is unfortunate that they did not include that with the remaster. They definitely could just had the fusion suit to begin with, but I digress. That's okay. It's no big issue, no big problem. Yeah, I'm just hoping that sometime down the road they could remaster 2 and 3, or, you know, have an ability to play it so you can play the whole Prime trilogy on the Switch. That'll be cool. Alright, then next up in the Prime games, we have Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, which is a sequel to Metroid Prime. This one's kind of decisive. Like, not a lot of people like Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. They think, because it's kind of weird, you got like the light and the dark abilities. I will admit that I haven't actually played through Echoes to completion yet, so I don't really know all the extent of it. I don't have a strong opinion of it, but we'll definitely be taking a look at this game, most likely, probably, as we get closer to the Metroid Prime 4 release date, as again, we do have some plans with the Metroid Prime games for that. But the one thing that's really cool about this is the case. Like, the fact that you have this, like, shimmering effect is really neat. Yeah, on the back it says A War of Light and Darkness, but yeah, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. This is also the first Metroid game that has multiplayer. And I guess it's because around this time Halo came out, so, you know, Metroid being pretty similar to Halo, they're like, alright, let's tack on a multiplayer mode so you can play 4-player co-op in like an arena battle sort of dealio. I don't know, maybe at some point we can get 4 people together and we can play the multiplayer for Prime 2 on GameCube. I think that would be kind of interesting to do. But yeah, this is pretty much the only multiplayer sort of Metroid game that came out on a home console. There is technically like a multiplayer mode with Metroid Prime Federation Force on the 3DS. Unfortunately, I don't own a copy of that, so if you wanted to help me out to add that to the collection, go ahead and hit me up in the comments, or go to our Discord server and then we can chat there, because I would not mind picking up a copy of that. Along with Metroid Prime Hunters, I believe. I don't own that. So, funny thing about that statement, I actually ended up picking up a copy of Metroid Prime Hunters for the Nintendo DS at a local anime con of all things. Now, we actually did a vlog of us going to that anime con, so if you want to see me picking that up, you can check it out there. So, yeah, pretty much really the only games that I'm missing from the Metroid series are Metroid Prime Pinball and Metroid Prime Federation Force. So yeah, with that little addendum out of the way, let's head back to the video. And then you had Metroid Prime Pinball. So pretty much like most of the handheld games I'm missing. Yeah, if you guys have any of those and wanted help fill out the collection, go ahead and hit me up and we can chat about it, because I would love to add them to my Metroid collection, and actually just to play the games in general, because I don't think I've played any of those up until this point, so that would be cool. Now, there was another Metroid Prime game, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, that came out on the Wii. I don't actually own that, so that's cool, but I do kind of own it through this Metroid Prime trilogy, which was an absolute steal, because I believe I got this game for $80. And this is the legit steelbook copy that has, you know, the manual. It's got this little book thing here, sort of like a making of, or just like an information pamphlet of like the entirety of the Metroid series with some concept art. Like this is a legit copy, and pretty much I only paid about 20 bucks for it because that $80 was a bundle. So it came with the Metroid Prime Trilogy, which alone was selling for about $80 at the time when I picked this up. And then it came with New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and then something else for the Wii. So like, yeah, when I saw this included, I was like, holy crap, that's a steal. And they were all complete. It was great. But yeah, circling back to Metroid Prime Trilogy, pretty much it is a pseudo, can you call this a remaster? I don't know if you can call this a remaster, but around this time on the Wii, what they would do is they'd take a lot of GameCube titles and then they would re-release them on the Wii with like new play controls. And this happened to be one of them, but it wasn't under that sort of moniker. It was just, here is the Metroid Prime Trilogy, so you get 1, 2, and 3, with Metroid Prime 1 and 2... Anyway, with Metroid Prime 1 and 2 now having motion controls, so you could like, you know, use that for aiming, and you could like flick the Wii remote to do Spring Ball. I think they actually added Spring Ball to Metroid Prime. Actually, no, I think it had that to begin with, but you had to get it as a power-up, and now you just have it by default by flicking, so that was cool. Now, I ended up seeking out a copy of this back in the day because I originally had Metroid Prime for the GameCube, and I just could not get behind the GameCube's control scheme. And eventually, at some point, I ended up finding out that this was a thing and was like, oh shoot, I could play this with like Wii controls. And the Wii was kind of my home console growing up, so I was very privy to first-person shooters on the Wii. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll just pick up the Prime Trilogy and then I'll start, you know, I'll play through Metroid Prime with that because it was a lot better, you know, aiming in that sense. And yeah, so I got this thing and I played about, I don't know, 20 minutes of Metroid Prime and then I quit. But yeah, that was primarily because at that point in time, I just came off of Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, and I was really into the 2D games, and I just could not get behind the Metroid Prime Trilogy. I've since come to like it more than I originally did, but yeah, coming off the 2D games, I was like, this is not my Metroid. Yeah, since then, I have gone back and I finished the GameCube version. I also finished the remaster on the Switch, and I still have yet to go back to the Waggle controls of the trilogy. And then next up we have Metroid Samus Returns. Now, I do own this complete in box, I just don't have the box right now. Luckily enough, this was in my 3DS, so I could actually pull out the cartridge and show it to you guys. But I do own the box, I do have this complete. I actually got this new off of Amazon, because Amazon, eBay, one of the two, some guy was like selling new copies of this for 40 bucks a piece. So I was like, oh shit, yeah, I'll go buy it new versus getting a used copy, so that was neat. Now, to talk specifically about this game, it is pretty much a remake of Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, but they added a map to this, amiibo support, as we went over in the previous video when we took a look at all the Metroid amiibos. But yeah, pretty much it's on the 3DS. So you have like a 3D sort of mode. It is definitely a pretty cool game, a faithful remake. So if you don't feel like going back to the Game Boy original, this game does a serviceable job of telling the same story and kind of giving you updated control schemes and, you know, features with like a map and stuff. But yeah, this is a pretty decent remake of a Game Boy classic. And now that kind of brings us full circle to Metroid Dread, the most recent Metroid game to be released, like new Metroid game, because technically the Metroid Prime Remaster came out after this game, but in terms of like a new Metroid game, Metroid Dread is the most recent, and this one is Metroid 5, essentially. This was supposed to be a game for the DS, I think, or the Game Boy Advance, one of the two. It was teased at one point and then kind of got canceled, so it took about 20 years for it to actually come out. Unfortunately, no reversible cover art with this one, but yeah, Metroid Dread, definitely a good Metroid game if you like the side-scrollers. Again, this one was made by the guys who did Samus Returns, so if you played that on the 3DS, you know, you're probably gonna like this. They did a lot in terms of her movement tech, so now she can slide, and they brought back the wall jump and all sorts of stuff. It is a great game. Yeah, that's pretty much a look into my history with the Metroid like series as a whole. I mean, which game would be my favorite out of this whole lot of Metroid games? I would have to say probably Zero Mission or Super Metroid. Zero Mission because of the nostalgia I have for it, as this was like my first Metroid game, like real game that I played on a handheld, but Super Metroid is such a good game, and I know everybody sings its praises, but it really is such a good game. Like, you could easily play through this in like 6 hours if you set aside a day. Yeah, with that, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to drop a like and make that subscribe button glow so that you don't miss any future content. And if you like videos like this where I kind of go through my gaming collection and talk about my history with stuff, I would love to do more videos like this, so definitely let me know down in the comments. And yeah, we can do more of these in the future. But until then, I will see you in the next one.